only person who could take on the deep state and win. And indeed, he did so tonight. And I can hardly wait for tomorrow and thereafter. Sheila, last words to you.
I'm really, really pleased to know that the biggest losers besides the Kamala Harris team is, of course, the media, who got everything wrong, continued to get everything wrong. And as you said, will explain to us why we were wrong to support Trump tomorrow morning, to excuse their failures. They'll learn nothing. And as long as they remain bad, I'll always have job security.
Yeah.
So
we're going to make our country better than it ever has been. And I said that many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness.
We found the CBC clip where they called Trump Nazi-like. I just want to show that, to show what our state broadcaster is spewing out there. And again, if this is all you watched, you would believe it. Here, let's take a look at the CBC calling Republicans Nazis, which is a form of Holocaust trivialization, by the way. Let's take a look.
Right. Talking about the propaganda campaign and the playbook of Trump. This is not new. This is not surprising. This is directly out of Hitler's playbook. This is out of an autocrat playbook. This is a way to, I mean, the things that Trump has done masterfully, frankly, is to get the entire, to get a big part of the population to believe that the game is rigged and to sow distrust in public institutions and the free press.
She lost. Calling Trump a Nazi did not work, but she's got nothing else, because anything else would be to acknowledge that something's missing on her side. Authenticity, appealing policies.
Likability.
Likability. And, you want to talk about propaganda and authoritarianism. Who nominated Kamala Harris? Not the Democratic Party. Some clique we don't even know to this day. Yeah, that's pretty gross. And I don't think anyone was convinced.
I mean, this CBC commentator who I've never heard of before, but if I know Justin Trudeau, he'll make sure that she runs as a Liberal in the next election. The thing she said that Trump did, Trudeau actually did.
Yeah. Through
Trudeau's authoritarianism. Did Trudeau cause people to distrust the mainstream media? Yes. Did Trudeau sow disharmony and discontent in the populace? Yes. Did Trudeau cause us to distrust our institutions? Yes. Why? Because he allowed all of them to be contaminated and people were able to see it. So it's like she's projecting all of those bad things that Trudeau did onto Trump to sort of cope, I guess, with her mourning right now. What stage of grief is that woman in?
Yeah. I should say that was Aisha Mills. She's an American. She's a Democrat activist from America.
Okay.
So I think the CBC...
Great. Good thing I've never heard of her.
I think it made sense for them to bring in Americans because, the CBC...
Fair enough.
Yeah. And she thought that Nazi line would go over well here. And why not? Justin Trudeau calls his opponents Nazis. The irony is that Chrystia Freeland's grandfather actually was a Nazi. Vladimir Putin says he's open. He thinks that Donald Trump is sincere in his desire to have a resolution. He wants to hear the details. I'm not sure what that means exactly. There's some evidence that the Russians prefer the Democrats. They invaded Ukraine when Barack Obama was president and invaded when Joe Biden was president, not when in the Trump interregnum. But how about China? What are they thinking tonight? How will the result change China-U.S. relations if it's a Kamala Harris win versus a Donald Trump win? What will change for China?
Well, if it's a Kamala Harris win, every new American president gives China a grace period. So I think that they'll get a longish grace period, especially because Tim Walz, who is very pro-China, will be her vice president. This is a critical time where we need to move quickly. So this would not be good for the United States. Trump's already been president, of course. He has suffered from China, which actually tilted the scales against him in 2020. He probably remembers that. So I suspect that he's going to be a lot less friendly, and there's certainly going to be a much shorter grace period. My sense, Ezra, is that regardless of all of this, the Chinese really don't want to see Trump near the Oval Office, because it's not so much his policies, though they don't like those, but it's because he's unpredictable. And they can deal with a hostile American president, but they can't deal with one they can't control. And I think that although Biden has done things that the Chinese don't like, they've always felt that they could work with him. They could deal with him on some level. I don't think they believe that about Trump.
Give me one more word about Tim Walz, because when I heard he had visited China 30 times, I was shocked by that. I learned a little bit more. It was an exchange program, but those exchange programs were not politically neutral. They were information gathering. They were for developing contacts. We later learned that Tim Walz had a romantic relationship when he was over there, and I'm not saying that was necessarily a sign of a spy. I'm not saying he is a Manchurian candidate, but he certainly, 30 times. There's no country in the world I visited 30 times other than my own home country. I mean, that's an astonishing number of trips. He probably knows a little bit of Chinese. He probably has dear friends over there. Talk a little bit about that. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it could be a really bad thing. What do you make of it?
Yeah, in Tim Walz's case, it's really, really bad, because in the 1990s and the following decade, he was taking American high school students to China to be exposed to Communist Party propaganda. And that activity could not have occurred without the approval of the Communist Party's United Front Work Department, which is a part of the party that subverts foreign governments. Now, Tim Walz can't say that he's a knucklehead, which is the term that he used for himself on a number of occasions. And the reason is because as governor of Minnesota, in other words, right now, he's had continuous contact with Communist Party front organizations. And he actually appointed a Communist Party agent to a state government board in Minnesota. So I think that there are really disturbing signs. And I've always felt that his presence on the ticket meant that Americans should not vote for Kamala Harris, no matter what they thought about Harris or Trump. You just can't have someone who could very well be a communist to be one heartbeat away from the Oval Office.
Everything that Kamala Harris exuded was anti-masculine. The white dudes for Harris was anti-masculine.
Yeah.
And I think that it moved from sort of a philosophical, theoretical queer theory into men wanting to be men. And Trump is as manly and macho as they get. Tim Walz is the opposite of that. And Kamala Harris feels like she's scolding you, all that either cackling or scolding. I think there's some women that men would love to vote for, but I think Kamala Harris felt like and I think black men in particular found her aesthetically and emotionally repulsive. Am I wrong on that? Maybe I'm looking through things through a gender lens I shouldn't, but I feel that
Biden felt that way.
What's that?
I said, I think Biden felt that way about her.
Yeah. What do you think, Libby?
Yeah, I mean, there has been a huge gender divide. If you look at some of the polling that's been done, women have been skewing towards Kamala, while men have been leaning towards Trump, even among Democrats. So I do think that there is something to that. But it's not just Kamala Harris that has this sort of toxic feminine thing going on. This is something we see throughout the Democratic Party. You have a party that tells men that they are not fit to be fathers, so they should make sure that their girlfriends can abort their babies. You have a party that tells men that they can swap their sex, that their sex is so malleable and insignificant to who they are that they can just change it on a whim and go along with something like that. You have a party that tells men not to defend themselves, right? I mean, look at what we have going on in New York right now. There's a man who protected an entire subway car from a deranged homeless man, and he's on trial for a second-degree murder. Why? And then now I see posts from people on social media saying, why aren't the men, standing up to the crazy people on the subway? Well, ladies, because they're getting prosecuted for doing stuff like that. So I think it's a much deeper problem than simply Kamala Harris. And I do think men are being sold a false bill of goods in this country. And there's a lot of areas where that's true. Abortion and trans are just two of them. But with abortion, why is the message to men from Democrats? The message to men is vote for Kamala Harris for your daughter's reproductive freedom. And I'm thinking, you're telling these men to vote for a woman so that their daughter can kill their grandchildren? I mean, goodness gracious. As a parent, at this point in my life, like, all I really want is grandchildren. As I said, my son's 14, and so he laughs at me because it's absurd when I say things like mommy needs grandbabies. Of course, I don't mean right now. But yeah, I think that it's a much more systemic issue with the Democrat Party that doesn't believe men are worthwhile, doesn't think men should be able to hold down jobs and support families and raise children, and doesn't even really know what a man is. So why would men be for a party that can't recognize what they are?
Joel Pollack, senior editor-at-large of Breitbart.com. Joel, at this time 4 years ago, it was very much uncertain what would happen. In fact, things were looking good for Trump, and then suddenly ballots were found and things were undone. I don't think that's going to happen tonight. Do you think it's too early to say Trump has won? What's your view on the night so far?
It's too early to say he's won, but all of the indicators are trending in that direction. And I would even say that it's looking too big to steal. Trump was doing fairly well on election night in 2020. He was not doing this well. And just to give you some idea of how well he's doing, Trump is winning in Muslim precincts that Joe Biden won with 88% of the vote in 2020. Trump is winning among Latino men in exit polls. Trump is winning 20 to 25% of Black men in some exit polls. So this is a resounding trend. I won't call it a victory yet, but if Kamala Harris wins, it is going to be very, very close, the equivalent of a Hail Mary pass to win a touchdown, to win a football game. Donald Trump is outperforming expectations, and I don't think we've seen an election like this in the United States since 1988, I think, when George H.W. Bush defeated Michael Dukakis. It's not going to be that big a margin, but right now it's a dominant performance by the Trump campaign. There's still a long way to go, and there are several states, key states, that have yet to be counted, but Kamala Harris has very few ways to win right now. Essentially, she has to win all of the remaining battleground states. And the exit polls are so favorable to Trump that it doesn't seem she's likely to do so. So cautiously, I would say that Trump is likely to win this election, and it could even be called before people go to sleep tonight, which was not something very many people would have predicted. I have to tip my hat to my own editor-in-chief, Alex Marlow, who was the only person I know who said on Sunday evening that this election could be decided on election night. He's the only person who saw the trends that way, and that's why he's editor-in-chief of Breitbart, because he has a handle on trends and the broad landscape of the news. But this is a very good night for Trump and the Republicans. And as I speak to you, you may have noticed I was checking my phone. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer will be losing his job, at least as Majority Leader. Republicans have taken the Senate in the United States. So they will hold the upper chamber, or take the upper chamber, from Democrats, and it remains to be seen what happens in the lower chamber in the House of Representatives. But having Republican control of the Senate means that if President Trump holds on and wins tonight, he will be able to put his nominees into his administration with great ease. And that is very, very good for Republicans.
I see on deck our West Coast Bureau Chief, Drea Humphrey. For a West Coast take on things, I mean, Vancouver is so far away from Toronto. I think Vancouver in many ways has more in common with the Pacific Northwest, with Seattle, with LA and San Francisco. It certainly thinks of itself as a Pacific place. It's also a very progressive place. Some of the same ideas, some of the same experiments with hard drug use and defunding police as Kamala Harris. Let's go to Drea for her take on things. How do you feel, Drea, about this? I think your very first video when you joined us was a pro-Trump video, if I recall. What do you make of his return to the throne?
Well, there's a lot of smiles at my house right now. We have some people who have been over watching. We're trying not to get too excited, but it looks like there's quite a few paths to success for Trump. I don't have my Trump mask. I couldn't find it. I actually tried to find my Trump mask, but that's okay. The spirit of that is still going well here. And BC is quite like those areas, but we're also very different in some ways too. In particular, if you look at what just happened with our election, which isn't even done being counted, whole other story. But, we're about 50-50 here now. Whereas if you look at our neighbors across the border, they are usually the Democrats. So, but we're watching closely and we've got smiles right now.
Now, how do you think this will affect things in BC, if at all? You mentioned that there were some vote counting issues, some irregularities there, but the election just finished, and it's really a nail-biter between the conservative John Rustad and the deep socialist, carbon-taxing, super woke David Eby. I guess things are sort of set now because he just had the election. Do you think this will in any way affect life in British Columbia, or will it just be something for Vancouverites to talk about like everyone else in the world is going to talk about?
Well, I think that first of all, the NDP has very narrowly won their majority, and I think that's going to stick. But we still have judicial counts, and just as of yesterday, Election BC told us they discovered 891 votes they didn't count in a ballot, and they also discovered up to 2,000 spread across 60 different ridings. So anything goes, it seems, out here. It's still a very tight race, and I don't know what's going to happen. But as far as what happens here, I think, traditionally we do see, as far as Canada goes, whether it's specific to BC or not, whatever happens in the U.S., there is a lot that follows. I think that this election says a lot about what we can expect for a federal election as well. So that's a big thing there. And I, even if you look at our polls, there was a recent poll, I forget who did the poll, but I think it came out in August, and it showed that Canadians are more accepting of Trump than they have been in the past as well. So support overall, I would say, and I know that this is a conservative slogan, but I would say for common sense is returning, and it's returning to places like British Columbia. And I think that's what you'll continue to see.
And it looks like, at least at this hour, Republicans were alert enough and engaged enough to head off the shenanigans of the past, combined with a strong campaign buttressed by at least one free speech channel, namely Twitter X. That's my take on things. What do you think of tonight? And of course, it's not all done. It looks good, but it's not over. But what's different between tonight and 4 years ago?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head regarding election integrity or election disintegrity that existed in 2020. You had a, let's say, unique and novel voting method that was imposed upon the country under the guise of pandemic last time around, where you had unlawfully non-legislators basically writing the rules and regulations around elections. And this was a tailor-made system for Democrats to exploit to the hilt. This was sort of the culmination of years of eviscerating, eroding election integrity standards. Plus, of course, you had Trump saddled with COVID as well, which the propaganda was never ending with respect to that, with the death counts on every single news network every single night, and the counter programming of the likes of Mayor Cuomo in New York, or Governor Cuomo in New York, rather. So you put all of those different factors together, and there's a sea change now, which is that there were 4 years, first of all, for Republicans to drastically up their game in terms of get out the vote efforts and being able to compete under a system alien to them. You did have some state legislators that took measures to dramatically improve their election integrity standards. But I think the really telling thing at the end of the night, and we'll see ultimately when the historians write this up and what the exit polling when it's more accurate than in real time shows us. But you had massive historic gains for Donald Trump and the populist nationalist MAGA movement among blacks, particularly black males, among Hispanic voters, men and women alike. I saw a statistic which was amazing, and this is sort of down ballot, but Ted Cruz had something like a plus 35% swing among Hispanic voters in Texas, from way underwater to, I think, +6 this time around, which basically re-delivered him a seat to the Senate. And really, you had the fear-mongering about, first of all, democracy being in peril from the very people imperiling it, and also the fear-mongering with regard to abortion and the argument that that was going to somehow swing enough women to tilt things. But the tail of the tape is simply that Donald Trump and the Get Out the Vote movement around him were able to turn out MAGA voters, were able to turn out low-propensity voters, essentially in the rural, forgotten American areas. And Kamala Harris did not have the juice, it doesn't appear, in the urban areas and then among the upper middle class suburbanites that it was assumed she would be able to turn. And the irony here is that she's going to have underperformed significantly, I think, Joe Biden in a number of precincts that were essential to his 2020 win.
Avi, I enjoyed that speech. It felt like a campaign rally, some of the same messages, but it was fun. He was having some fun. And I think it's going to be a very fun 4 years for at least people with our point of view.
Absolutely, Ezra. Forget about fun. The world is not coming to an end.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has seriously saved us, and the energy here was incredible. Unfortunately, we couldn't because we're stuck by the internet, the mounted internet. You could not get any reception on the floor where he was speaking. So we were really just trying to capture that moment. And I think we did a great job, Lincoln, capturing, firstly, the reaction of the crowd in the moment that it was called, and then as Donald Trump came out. And I think this is a message to the left, but not only to the left, Ezra. This is a message to the woke right, who you got to remember over the last couple of months have been rallying against Donald Trump, fueled by anti-Semitism, fueled by the hatred for Jews. And not only did they prove how irrelevant they all are, they proved that actually America stands with Trump, America stands with all his messaging, all the key points that, as we were crossing the country in the last month, which was the border was a main issue. I've forgotten the three main issues we had. We had the border. What was the two?
Sorry,
there we go. What was the main issues that we had? I've gone blank. Border. That's right, the cost of living. So you had it in this order: the cost of living, the immigration, the open border, and not just on border towns, but even in New York, you remember, across the country. And then, of course, the abortion came number 3. And all the guilt trips that you got from the left didn't work. And all the hatred you got from the extreme right and the woke right didn't work. Tonight, you saw a diverse crowd here full of love.
Get out there and vote. Don't leave it. Don't sit back and think someone else will take care of this. Because if America falls, we all fall. Canada's already on the way out, as you very well know. The United Kingdom is already on the way out. Much of Western Europe has gone already.
Father Calvin, what does this election mean for Christians to be Christians in the public square should the Democrats win? We know this is a part of label the good folks at the Knights of Columbus as some sort of extremist group. So what happens to religious freedom specifically for Christians if we see a Kamala Harris presidency?
We can't even face that. We cannot get to that point. We've got to do everything we can to prevent it. Because you're right, traditional values are being seen as extreme. Catholics are on the FBI watch list now. Imagine that. It's the meme that we see all the time, isn't it? One mother, one father, 2 or 3 children living on a country estate, white picket fence with a dog and a rocking chair. The American dream is now seen as extremism. It's because for so long we've been sitting back and letting people do whatever they want. So we've been liberal. We've been saying, and I use the royal we, I mean the whole of the West, we've been saying things like, So what? Let people do whatever they want to do within the four walls of their own home. They're not hurting anybody. But of course, that's a lie. It's a fallacy. If you are sinning, you are always hurting somebody. And then we've moved on from that step to, well, so two men loving each other or two women loving each other, what does it matter? As long as they're committed to each other. And so you keep going past that. And then we get to the stage of, well, if a man wants to identify as a woman, who am I to judge? If a woman wants to use male pronouns, and we keep this slippery slope, piece by piece, we've given away normality and embraced insanity. And at the same time, we've been very liberal in saying, okay, well, you guys can get on with whatever you want to get on with. And then they've said, well, no, that's not enough. It's not enough for us to get on with what we want to get on with. We need you to affirm us in what we're getting on with. And so again, we've played nice and said, okay, well, we'll use your pronouns and we'll call you a he or a she or a they or a them, whatever. And then it's no longer enough to affirm. We have to encourage, embrace, and celebrate. And then we did that shamefully. And then it moves on from celebrating to, look, this is no longer an alternative option. This is the normative. And actually everything that was normative is oppressive and needs to be disregarded. So the traditional family is now seen as extremist because everything has to be gay.
California, it did once upon a time go Republican. Ronald Reagan swept it and 48 other states.
Oh yeah.
What happened?
California was a hard Republican state. A bastion of conservatism. When I got here in 72 as a little kid, Ronald Reagan was the governor. And it was a great state. It was a prosperous state, an exciting state. Palm trees, sunshine. You could be whatever you wanted to be. And that was true up until kind of the 90s. And I took advantage of it. Ezra, I have got to do through California. I've been a stand-up comic. I've been a media personality. I've been a best-selling author. I've been a trial lawyer. I've been an Army colonel. There's no limits to what you can do in the real California. And it's people like Kamala Harris who have changed that reality. It is no longer that California, and it's heartbreaking. She wants to do this to the whole country.
Well, what is the number one thing she's done? Is it mass immigration? Is it the destruction of law and order? What was the thing that turned the California of your youth to sort of the failed state of today?
Well, it was a bunch of things. It was mass illegal immigration was one of them. Republicans got lazy. And that happens a lot with Republicans. You look at deep red states, and tonight we keep seeing states like Utah and Idaho and Texas. They're still going red. But, they get soft. They get soft because they've won for too long. And the Democrats are eventually going to crack that unless they get a lot harder. That's the beauty of a place like California. We have a very small Republican Party, but it's feisty. And what they've done here in California is they've learned to do things like ballot harvesting, which is legal in California. And they've learned to do it better than Democrats. And we've come in and we've taken back several House seats by doing that. Now, I think it's going to be a stretch to get a Republican president elected out of California. Trump will probably do about 35-40%, and the Democrat will probably do about 60%. But California fell over 30 years. It's going to take a few decades to get it back.
Do you think Joe Biden could have done it? I mean, he was falling apart on that debate stage with Donald Trump. People saw they saw someone who was in decline, and they didn't hate him. I think they more felt sorry for him than anything, but they realized this man ain't up for the job. Kamala Harris looks like she's losing. Would Joe Biden have lost too?
This is the amazing thing. I cannot pretend to have this knowledge myself. This is Robert Barnes, my partner in law for our show, our locals community. He said this. He said he bet that they would not withdraw Biden because he said, as crazy as it sounds, Kamala is less popular than Biden. And I actually bet on Biden withdrawing from the race because I said, no, they have to. And they did. So Robert was sort of wrong for the right reasons. He said Kamala Harris is less popular than Biden. Gavin Newsom was less popular than Biden. Gretchen Whitmer is less popular. And they nonetheless did it And the question is whether or not they did it or whether or not she orchestrated it. And I believe she did. She stabbed him in the back when she saw $100 million in his coffers to steal. And she outmaneuvered Obama, and she outmaneuvered Gretchen and Gavin, and she stole it. But the bottom line, Robert was saying they would not do it because she's even more unpopular than Biden is. Biden at least has the Rust Belt. Biden has Middle America to some extent, or is more favorable there. You take a California progressive DA, AG, she'll be even less popular in Middle America than Biden. And lo and behold, he was right, I was right, and the world is seeing it. Like it's an amazing thing. If you get out of your ideological silo and you actually listen to the people who have their ear to the ground, you'll get more accurate information. But no, I think Biden would have performed better than Kamala. Even a demented, kick him in the ass Joe Biden would have done better than Kamala. And we all thought so. But they took their gambit.
What effect do you think that the appointment of RFK, or the potential appointment of RFK to a Trump administration and then bringing him into the campaign, what effect do you think that had on independent voters? Because I know there are a lot of independents who look at Trump as though, like an early adopter of vaccine pushing and lockdowns and a proponent of the things that, plagued us for nearly 3 years. So I guess my question is, what effect does RFK have on those independent voters, which are so important? I think they're the make or break.
I think it restores a level of trust, for sure, with the people who felt like Trump slighted them through Operation Warp Speed, which did allow for that fast tracking of the COVID vaccines into the arms of the United States population. But, the more I spoke to people like Paul Elias Alexander, who was part of the team of advisors to Trump during that tumultuous time in the beginnings of 2020 and the early stages of the pandemic, was that he was really misled and misguided into that decision. So take that for what it's worth. But I think that bringing in somebody like Robert F. Kennedy, who has typically always been very liberal,
I wouldn't let him near. I wouldn't let him near environment. That's for sure. But health, fine.
Yeah, and I think I saw rumblings as well that he would be part of of agriculture, and so the food. The medicines, I think that under a Trump administration, there's going to be a complete revamping of those agencies. And as we see, there was Casey Means, when she joined Tucker Carlson several weeks ago, saying 74% of Americans are now overweight or obese. That is a staggering statistic, and children especially are not much further behind. And so when you have a former Stanford trained surgeon leaving mainstream medicine, sounding the alarm on the absolute devastating toll that these policies and the way that our agencies are currently being run are having on our children, our future, it's alarming. And I think that a cleaning of house is much needed. And that's something that I'm very much excited to see moving forward under a Trump administration.
I think that not only is it exciting, not only do I like RFK Jr. because he really is what liberals were supposed to be and what they were for a generation: hopeful, loving, friendly, not so bloody divisive. And it's a kind of penance for Donald Trump for believing the Anthony Fauci's and going down that road and handing things over to Big Pharma. Trump made some errors there that I don't actually think, Trump's not very good at saying sorry, but I think putting RFK Jr. in those positions is more important than a sorry. It's a fix.
I was just looking at James's X account, and already it seems as though the dirty tricks are starting to roll in. Looks like there's a gas leak at one polling station, and non-citizens on the voter rolls. We have to be very careful because we're currently broadcasting on the censorship platform of YouTube while simultaneously streaming to Rumble, and there are things that we can say over there that we can't say on the other platform. But what impact do you think these dirty tricks will have, or are people more attuned to them now?
Well, they will have some impact. You mentioned the gas leak. I believe that's in Michigan. There are all kinds of weird evacuations taking place across Pennsylvania. One of the counties in Pennsylvania, in fact, had its voting extended by 2 hours because of the machine's not working right throughout the day. People have been being turned out all day saying things aren't working, things won't print right, whatever, come back later, fill out a provisional ballot, we'll take care of it. There are similar problems, bomb threats being called in at various places. Georgia is particularly bad for that, but they've also been in other places. The really remarkable thing to point out about this is that they're only happening in swing states. It's happening in virtually all of the swing states, and it's not happening anywhere else, which is a remarkable coincidence. And that it's been happening since like 7 a.m. this morning is another kind of remarkable coincidence. So it will have some impact because there will be people who showed up to vote who didn't have time, who had to go back to work, or who gave up and couldn't do the true difficult patriotic duty of standing in line longer, making sure that their vote gets counted. And so some of those people will end up having been turned away. On the other hand, it will not have the kind of impact that I think the people might expect that it might, or fear that it might, because it's all being caught. Legal experts, lawyers are intervening. That the courts are intervening. That's why this county in Pennsylvania has longer hours tonight. And so a lot of it's being caught as it's happening, and adjustments are being made, which is a distinct difference from what was going on in 2020, where we were all kind of biting our nails and sipping our bourbon and hoping things were going to work out. There's a lot more people on the ground keeping their eyes open and making sure things are working out today. So I'm hoping that the impact will be not zero, but minimal.
Now, I see our friend Alexa Lavoie is outside Trump Tower in New York City. A crowd is gathered. I see someone waving an American flag. Alexa, tell us what you see.
Oh my God, it's lots of people, a lot of MAGA hats, I would say. You can just, and a lot of police also. There is a lot of New York police. I think they are maybe scared that everything escalates when we will know the result. So they are now asking the people to push themselves out of the entrance of the Trump Tower. It just happened now. So right now they are celebrating. So apparently I need to go to the other side of the street myself too. But anyway, a lot of people, a lot of Jewish people, a lot of flag, American flag. It's all supporter of Donald Trump. So we'll see what will happen when we will have the result. I think it's imminent. So I need to go the other side because the police is actually cleaning the place.
It's looking like we'll learn the results a lot sooner than last time.
Isn't that the truth? Now, Austin is quite an interesting place. I mean, it's regarded as a lefty city for Texas. It's the capital. They have the phrase, keep Austin weird, but there's a lot of freedom-ish things there. Elon Musk has a lot of his facilities there. I understand Twitter is just recently moved to a suburb of Austin. Even Alex Jones is there. Joe Rogan is there. There's a lot of interesting ideas there. Many of them fleeing from California. Isn't that the truth?
Right. There's a massive tech scene here in Austin. You were just talking about how Silicon Valley sort of flipped for Trump over the course of the last few years. And you really feel that here in Austin, because I think a lot of the people who worked in tech, who experienced that very left-wing culture, who experienced the consequences of some Democrat urban policies in particular, as well as high taxes, a lot of them are the people who moved to Austin.
Well, that's the thing, is San Francisco is, adjacent to Silicon Valley. San Francisco has one of the worst crime and drug abuse problems. And we were just talking to Kurt Schlichter in LA, who says, well, I live in a rich neighborhood. These problems don't affect me. Well, until they do. The same thing can be said about Silicon Valley. And we've heard tale after tale of high-powered executives being mugged, being beaten. And they don't like it either. And there's a saying that a conservative is a liberal who's been mugged. And I think a lot of liberals were mugged. The number one factor is not money. It's not mainstream media. It's not even a campaign strategy. I think the number one factor is Twitter or X itself. What do you think about that theory?
100%, I think Elon Musk saved democracy. I mean, assuming Trump wins, right? Assuming nothing goes wrong. But I think it made a big difference. I think it's making a huge difference because without X, Trump wouldn't have this massive platform for which to, campaign. No one would be allowed to campaign on his behalf either, right? So I think it's made a massive difference. And we're seeing a huge shift in the way that the media covers this stuff because they are fact-checked in real time. Anytime they make something up, right? Like before, they would be able to get away with it. We saw this with the Hunter Biden laptop story. We saw it with the Russian disinformation story that just spread like wildfire. And there was like no counterpoint to it. But now when they make up a story and they made up like 5-10 different stories in the past 2 weeks alone. And we have countered that instantly to the point where, you have people like Anderson Cooper and Jake Tapper on CNN taking those talking points that we put out there to counter the lies and disinformation that are being, pushed by less journalistic people like Joe Scarborough.
I am on 17th Street, and this is what I referred to in my first hit, Ezra. A lot of businesses here, starting with Frame Mender, an optical store, and then we have McDonald's and the Potbelly restaurant and Pete's Coffee. The Potbelly, that's the restaurant where the building manager said you are looking at $45,000 of plywood covering the windows. So obviously these businesses, I guess as an insurance policy, are making sure they're fortified. Now I can tell you, Ezra, I'm experiencing a sense of deja vu in downtown Washington, because it is like the Freedom Convoy days in Ottawa back in February of 2022, which is to say huge police presence, and certain streets are blocked off with police cruisers with their light bars flashing, typically those roads that lead to the White House. I spoke to an officer off camera and I said, are you expecting any trouble? And he gave a nervous chuckle and he said, maybe. So the night is young. And but I got to tell you, there's like an ominous feeling in the air in terms of, I think, if Trump does win, because like I said earlier, Ezra, I don't see MAGA Nation going on a rampage. I do see Antifa, the pro-Hamas, Black Lives Matters, and all the rest going brick throwing and Molotov cocktail to do a mostly peaceful protest. And by the way, that won't be the narrative won't be an insurrection for their demonstration, their riot, Ezra. It'll be standing up for democracy.
First term, I will govern by a simple motto: promises made, promises kept. We're going to keep our promises. Nothing will stop me from keeping my word to you, the people. We will make America safe, strong, prosperous, powerful, and free again. And I'm asking every citizen all across our land to join me in this noble and righteous endeavor. That's what it is. It's time to put the divisions of the past 4 years behind us. It's time to unite. And we're going to try. We have to try. And it's going to happen. Success will bring us together. I've seen that. I saw that in the first term. When we became more and more successful, people started coming together. Success is going to bring us together, and we are going to start by all putting America first. We have to put our country first for at least a period of time. We have to fix it, because together we can truly make America great again for all Americans. So I want to just tell you what a great honor this is. I want to thank you. I will not let you down. America's future will be bigger, better, bolder, richer, safer, and stronger than it has ever been before. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
There you have it, the 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, giving a speech with lots of anecdotes and entertaining meander. He talked about Elon Musk's rocket ship, which is his favorite story to tell on the campaign trail. I love it. And we're going to get back to that style of speechifying. Donald Trump, famous for giving hour-long press scrums and calling first on his most hostile enemies in the press gallery. Remember when Jim Acosta of CNN always used to just pillory and defame Trump, yet Trump always went to him. He liked the banter, how different and how much more authentic than Kamala Harris. One thing I learned in this speech that I was not aware of is that as of now, Donald Trump is winning the popular vote. You know, the Democrats usually have that advantage because they rack up huge majorities in big states like New York and California. That did not happen tonight. The statistics I just saw said that Trump is millions of votes ahead of Kamala Harris. Now, here's the other thing I can't understand. As of when I just checked a moment ago, Kamala Harris had 63 million votes. Joe Biden allegedly had 81 million in 2020. Are we still supposed to believe that? Are we still supposed to believe that stat? I'll just leave that there. But here's what Donald Trump did. He won the presidency. He won the popular vote. He won the Electoral College. He won the Senate. He won the House. And he did all this with the entire establishment against him, the media establishment, the legal establishment, the cultural establishment, Wall Street. He had a fraction of Silicon Valley, but the money isn't what gave him the advantage. This really is remarkable. It really is the best outcome for America. I think I just saw some lefty tweet that, basically that Trump won all of these measurements. And the growth that Trump had amongst groups who allegedly hate him, Muslims, Arabs, blacks, Latinos, etc., is that if you're still using the language of, you're bigoted, you're anti-gay, if you're just still name calling, if you're on the left and you're still trying those moves, you haven't learned a bloody thing and you're going to lose again. I take some courage from tonight, some encouragement. I think that people in Canada are fed up with a lot of the same things too. We're not as bold as Americans, but I think our time will come. I don't know. I like that speech. I like his sense of humor. I like the crew he hangs out with. RFK Jr. was not there tonight. Elon Musk was not there, but there is a dream team there. Tulsi Gabbard was not there. We know. I can hardly wait to see who his Attorney General is going to be. I can hardly wait to see who his Secretary of State is going to be. I think he's going to make much better appointments and personnel decisions this time than the last time around because he learned his lesson. I don't know. I'm pretty excited, Sheila. How about you?
I love knowing that Donald Trump feels exactly the same way as I do on RFK. He's the right guy to be in charge of making America healthy again, but don't let him near the energy sector. Yeah. You can't touch the oil. You can do whatever you want. Whatever you want with health and big pharma and agriculture. Worry about high fructose corn syrup in all of the foods. Yes, yes, yes. But don't you dare go anywhere near the energy sector. And that made me feel happy because I have been an RFK skeptic because I do disagree with him on all of his viewpoints on the energy sector and the environment. Yeah. He's been a radical on those issues. But such is conservatism, where you could be completely in disagreement with somebody on one issue and not throw the baby out with the bathwater and see the value in them on the things that they're passionate about. So that made me feel really happy, and I'm glad Trump made a bit of a joke about it.
But most of all, I want to thank the millions of hardworking Americans across the nation who have always been the heart and soul of this really great movement. We've been through so much together, and today you showed up in record numbers to deliver a victory like no other. This was something special, and we're gonna pay you back. We're gonna do the best job. We're gonna turn it around. It's got to be turned around. It's got to be turned around fast, and we're gonna turn it around. We're gonna do it in every way, with so many ways, but we're gonna do it in every way. This will forever be remembered as the day the American people regained control of their country. So I just want to say that on behalf of this great group of people, these are hardworking people. These are fantastic people. And
a burden has been lifted off of me because I felt the campaign was going well. It looked good. Trump was happy. They had a strong message. Cheating, and that worry is now being lifted. It's a cheat-proof margin Rebel News is turning 10 in a couple of months. And I should say that we were, other than Conrad Black, the only journalists in Canada to not only predict Donald Trump's win, but to support it. We were very early boosters of him. And we maintained that he was the disruptor, the only person who could take on the deep state and win. And indeed, he did so tonight. And I can hardly wait for tomorrow and thereafter. Sheila, last words to you.
I'm just relieved that our long campaign watching this is over. It feels like it's just a constant state of campaigning in the United States. I'm really, really pleased to know that the biggest losers besides the Kamala Harris team is, of course, the media, who got everything wrong, continued to get everything wrong, and as you said, will explain to us why we were wrong to support Trump tomorrow morning, to excuse their failures. They'll learn nothing. And as long as they remain bad, I'll always have job security.
Yeah.
So